Imagine checking into Willowbrook Hotel, a grand place known for its old-world charm, and the chilling tales that come with it. At first glance, it seems like a typical historic hotel. The lobby boasts elegant chandeliers, vintage furniture, and a staff that greets you warmly, but when the sun sets, the atmosphere shifts, and whispers of its haunted history creep in. A few years ago, a young woman named Sarah checked into Willowbrook for a quiet weekend escape. She'd heard rumors about the place, nothing too serious, just the typical haunted hotel talk. But on her second night, she was woken up by a strange feeling as though someone was watching her. Sarah sat up, her heart pounding, and peered into the dimly lit hallway outside her door. At first, there was nothing, but then she saw it. A shadow, darker than the rest of the hallway, standing at the end, just watching. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her, but when she opened them again, it was still there. Motionless, eerie, and almost human. She thought about calling for help, but a part of her felt frozen, as if the shadow held her in its gaze. And then, without warning, the figure began to move, slowly gliding down the hallway toward her room. Panicked, Sarah slammed the door, locking it and backing away, her heart racing. She waited, straining to hear footsteps, but there was only silence. When she finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. Over the years, countless guests have reported seeing that same shadowy figure at the end of their hallway, just staring, always disappearing when they look away. Some believe it's the spirit of a long-lost hotel worker, wandering the halls, waiting for something, or someone. So if you're ever in Willowbrook Hotel and you feel eyes on you, don't brush it off too quickly. Some shadows aren't just shadows. They say Maple Drive Bridge holds a dark secret. Every so often, around midnight, drivers passing over it hear an agonizing scream echoing from beneath. Most ignore it, thinking it's just their imagination. Until the scream grows louder, desperate, filling the air with a chilling cry for help. One night, a man named Jake decided to stop, determined to see what was making that terrible sound. He stepped out of his car and peered over the edge, but there was nothing below. Just dark, empty water, completely still. Then, just as he turned to leave, the scream started again, this time right behind him. Terrified, he spun around, but no one was there. Heart racing, he scrambled back into his car and drove off, the scream fading into the night as he sped away. Locals believe it's the spirit of a young woman who drowned there years ago, forever calling out for someone to save her. So, if you ever find yourself on Maple Drive Bridge at midnight, keep driving. Some cries for help are best left unanswered. Deep in Cooper's Point Woods, there's a tree that locals say breathes. At first, it just sounds like wind passing through the branches, but as you get closer, the sound grows louder, turning into a slow, raspy breath, like someone or something trapped inside. Years ago, a hiker named Ben decided to investigate the legend for himself. He followed the path until he reached the tree. As he stood there, the air grew thick and he began to hear it, the unmistakable sound of breathing, deep and heavy, coming from within the twisted bark. The ground around him felt colder, almost as if the tree were drawing his warmth. Just when he was about to reach out and touch the bark, he felt a cold rush of air behind him, followed by a whisper that seemed to come from the tree itself. "Leave, before it's too late." Ben didn't wait to hear it twice. He ran out of the woods and never looked back. Some say the tree holds the soul of someone buried nearby, trapped for eternity. So if you find yourself in Cooper's Point Woods and hear the tree's breath, take a deep one of your own and get out while you can. Alexander Inn's room 203 looks like any other, but those who've stayed there know better. Guests report waking up at 3 a.m. to the sound of soft footsteps pacing back and forth, but when they open their eyes, the room is empty. One guest, Lily, thought it was just a story until she stayed there herself. Her first night, she woke to the feeling of icy fingers brushing her face. Startled, she looked around but saw nothing. Then she noticed something chilling, the faint outline of a woman in white standing by the window, her back turned, staring out into the night. Frozen in fear, Lily watched as the woman slowly turned her head toward her, her hollow eyes filled with sorrow. Before she could scream, the figure vanished, leaving only the faint scent of roses lingering in the air. Locals believe it's the spirit of a bride who stayed in room 203 and never left, so if you ever find yourself at the Alexander Inn and they offer you room 203, maybe ask for another. Alexander Inn's room 203 looks like any other, But those who've stayed there know better. Guests report waking up at 3 a.m. to the sound of soft footsteps pacing back and forth, but when they open their eyes, the room is empty. One guest, Lily, thought it was just a story until she stayed there herself. Her first night, she woke to the feeling of icy fingers brushing her face. Startled, she looked around but saw nothing. Then she noticed something chilling, the faint outline of a woman in white standing by the window, her back turned, staring out into the night. Frozen in fear, Lily watched as the woman slowly turned her head toward her, her hollow eyes filled with sorrow. Before she could scream, the figure vanished, leaving only the faint scent of roses lingering in the air. Locals believe it's the spirit of a bride who stayed in room 203 and never left, so if you ever find yourself at the Alexander Inn and they offer you room 203, maybe ask for another. Rosie's Diner has a regular customer who shows up long after closing. It's always around 2 a.m. when the last of the staff are wrapping up for the night. They say he's an elderly man in a fedora and an old trench coat who always takes a seat at table 6 and quietly orders a cup of coffee. One night, the new waitress, Maggie, saw him there and thought nothing of it. She poured him a coffee and went about her closing duties. But when she turned back, the coffee was untouched, and the man was gone. Confused, she checked the security footage. There he was, but only for a few seconds. He appeared out of nowhere, sitting at table 6, only to vanish before her eyes. The next morning, the staff found a dollar bill on the table, old and worn, dated from 1943. Locals say it's the ghost of a man who was a Rosie's regular in the 40s, waiting for someone who never arrived. So if you're ever there late at night and see someone at table 6, don't be too quick to pour that coffee. Easton Park seems like any other playground by day, but as the sun sets, a different kind of visitor appears. Locals call her the Lost Girl. She's often spotted by the swings, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, watching the other children play. She never joins them, just stares, waiting. One evening, a father noticed his young daughter talking to someone near the swings, though no one else was around. When he approached, she pointed and said, "Daddy, can't you see the girl? She says she's waiting for her mom." The father felt a chill and turned to look, but all he saw was an empty swing moving on its own. Later, he learned that a young girl disappeared from Easton Park decades ago, never found. Some believe she's still there waiting for someone to take her home. So, if you ever find yourself at Easton Park after dark and notice a figure near the swings, remember, some playmates aren't meant to be seen. Locals know to avoid Lakeside Trail after dark. It's not just the shadows that make it eerie, it's the cries. Many hikers report hearing faint, desperate cries for help coming from the lake. Some stop, thinking someone's in danger, but as they listen, the cries grow louder, closer, until it feels like they're right behind them. One night, a jogger named Chris decided to see for himself. He paused near the lake, straining to hear the sound, when suddenly a woman's voice whispered, "Help me, please!" Panicked, he spun around, but no one was there. Then, out of nowhere, he felt a cold hand graze his shoulder. Terrified, Chris sprinted back to the trailhead and never looked back. He later learned that years ago, a woman drowned in that lake. Her body never recovered. Some believe she's still out there, calling for someone to save her. So, if you ever find yourself on Lakeside Trail and hear those phantom cries, don't stop. Some souls are beyond saving. On Highway 63, there's a legend every local driver knows, the story of the vanishing hitchhiker. Late at night, drivers often see a man on the roadside, hand outstretched, looking for a ride. He's pale, dressed in tattered clothes, and has a haunted look in his eyes. One night, a trucker named Sam spotted him and pulled over. The man climbed in without a word, staring straight ahead as if lost in thought. Sam tried making small talk, but the man only murmured, "I just need to get home." Then, as they neared a sharp curve, Sam glanced over and his blood ran cold. The seat beside him was empty. Panicked, Sam pulled over, heart racing. Locals later told him he wasn't the first to give that man a ride. They say he's the spirit of a man who died in a crash along that very road, trying to find his way back, or perhaps searching for the driver who left him there. Hamilton Farm looks like any old, forgotten property, until night falls. Locals avoid it after dusk, saying the place comes alive with sounds that send chills down your spine. Chains rattling, heavy footsteps echoing through empty rooms, and whispers you can't quite make out. Years ago, a farmhand named Tom suffered a terrible accident here, crushed by a piece of machinery. Ever since visitors claim they hear him wandering the grounds, as if he's still hard at work, his spirit bound to the place in chains. One evening, a pair of thrill-seeking teenagers snuck in, laughing off the ghost stories, until they heard the unmistakable clinking of chains coming from the barn. Suddenly, heavy footsteps moved toward them, each step louder than the last. Terrified, they ran for the door, but one of them swore he felt a cold iron grip brush his shoulder just before they escaped. So if you ever get curious about Hamilton Farm, remember, some workers never clock out, even in the afterlife. Baldwin Mansion has stood empty for years, yet the locals say it's never truly vacant. Those who dare to pass by at midnight hear the sorrowful cries of a woman, a widow in black, mourning her lost love. They say she roams the halls, her face hidden beneath a dark veil, clutching an old locket that once belonged to her husband. One night, a group of friends sneaked inside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ghostly widow. They crept through the dusty corridors, every floorboard creaking beneath their feet, until the clock struck 12. Suddenly, the distant sound of sobbing echoed through the halls, growing louder and more heart-wrenching. In the dim moonlight, they saw her, a figure in black, gliding past them, her shoulders shaking with grief. One friend whispered her name, hoping she'd turn, and she did. But as she looked up, her face was a pale, hollow void, eyes dark and endless with sorrow. Locals say she's doomed to walk the mansion forever, searching for her lost love. So if you ever hear her cries echoing from Baldwin Mansion, stay quiet and let her pass. Stokes Antiques holds secrets and shadows of those who've dared to look into it. Many customers have claimed that when they gaze into the glass, they see shadowy figures lurking just behind them, or even worse, their own reflection behaving differently. One customer, a woman named Ellen, found herself drawn to the mirror's intricate frame. She stepped closer, peering into the dusty glass, when suddenly, she noticed something chilling. Her reflection didn't look back. Instead, it stared at her with a slow, unsettling smile that Ellen herself hadn't made. Paralyzed with fear, she watched as her reflection raised a hand to the glass, as if trying to reach out. Panicked, Ellen stumbled back, breaking eye contact. When she looked again, her reflection was back to normal, but the image of that sinister smile haunted her for days. Some say the mirror traps the spirits of those who gaze too long, holding a piece of them forever. So if you ever find yourself in Stokes Antiques and you're tempted to look, maybe just keep walking. In the quiet hours of the night, Aldridge Hall comes alive with the haunting sound of a piano playing itself. The music drifts through the empty rooms, a melancholy tune that's both beautiful and chilling. Those who've heard it say the melody is strangely captivating, and if you listen long enough, a deep sadness seeps into your heart, as if you're mourning someone you've long forgotten. One evening, a security guard named Tom was making his rounds when he heard the soft, sorrowful notes filling the hall. Drawn to the sound, he found himself standing by the piano, watching the keys move as though guided by invisible hands. The music wrapped around him, and soon, Tom felt an overwhelming sense of loss, a pain he couldn't explain, as if he were missing someone who'd been lost to him forever. Realizing he was lost in the music, Tom snapped out of it and backed away, feeling drained and unsettled. Locals say the piano plays for a lost lover, the ghostly musician trapped in an endless loop of sorrow. So, if you ever pass by Aldridge Hall and hear the sad tune of the piano, resist the urge to listen too long. Some songs are meant to haunt the soul. Elm Street is home to a spine-chilling legend, a ghostly woman, old and frail, who wanders the street at night muttering to herself. Those who've seen her say she's searching, looking for the family that abandoned her long ago. Her whispers are soft, haunting, barely more than a breath. But if you get too close, you might just hear something terrifying, your own name. One evening, a young man named Mark was walking home along Elm Street when he spotted her, shuffling slowly, her gray hair tangled and her gaze distant. As he passed, he heard her whisper, "Is that you?" Mark froze, heart pounding, before he heard it again. "Mark, is that you?" She had somehow whispered his name. Terrified, he turned to run, but her whispers followed him, lingering in the air like a memory he couldn't shake. They say if she calls your name, it's because she's chosen you to stay with her, forever wandering Elm Street in search of what's lost. So, if you ever find yourself on Elm Street after dark, don't look too closely at the shadows. Some lost souls are best left undisturbed. St. Andrew's Church has been silent for years, its bells long removed, yet locals claim they still hear them ring every night at midnight. The eerie chimes echo across town, sending chills down the spine of anyone awake to hear them. It's as if the church itself remembers those bells and won't let them be forgotten. One midnight, a curious visitor named Emily decided to see for herself. As the clock struck 12, a distant toll filled the air. A deep, haunting chime. She could hardly believe it, but there it was, ringing out from the empty steeple. She felt a strange presence around her, like eyes watching her from the shadows. Locals believe it's the spirit of a former priest, bound to the church he loved and refusing to leave his place of worship, ringing those ghostly bells in a final call to his lost congregation. So, if you're near St. Andrew's at midnight and hear those phantom bells, listen closely. You may feel the gaze of the priest who never left. Cedar Hills Hotel has its share of ghost stories, but none are as captivating or tragic as the Lady in Red. Late at night, she appears in the ballroom, a vision in crimson, standing silently as if waiting for someone. She stares at the entrance, hoping, it seems, for a dance that will never come. One night, a hotel guest spotted her from across the room. Intrigued, he walked closer, feeling the chill of her presence as he neared. Her face was solemn, lost in sorrow, but when he extended his hand, she vanished, leaving only the faint scent of roses lingering in the air. Locals say she was a young woman stood up by her lover decades ago, doomed to wait forever for the dance they promised. Now, her spirit remains, tied to the ballroom, endlessly reliving that heartbreaking moment. So if you ever find yourself at Cedar Hills and catch a glimpse of the Lady in Red, remember, some dances are meant to haunt the soul forever. Every evening as dusk settles over the Oakwood Library, the lights begin to flicker without reason, casting eerie shadows that dance across the walls. On colder nights, a chill fills the air, even when the heaters hum softly. Some swear they've heard whispers drifting through the aisles, faintly calling names in tones both familiar and strange. Legend has it that decades ago, a devoted librarian perished in a sudden fire, her last moments spent trying to save her precious books. Now, she's said to roam the darkened aisles, her spirit bound to the library. The few brave enough to wander there alone after closing claim to feel the weight of watchful eyes and hear soft footsteps following them. As they hurry out, one final flicker of the lights hints that she's still there, ever vigilant, guarding her beloved books from anyone who dares disturb their rest. At Lake Martin, locals whisper about the ghostly figure that appears on misty nights. A lone fisherman, his body half transparent, floating just above the water's glassy surface. They say he was lost to the lake one stormy night, his boat overturned and swallowed whole, leaving no trace. Now, he returns, haunting the waters that took him. If you're by the shore and spot his shadowy figure, beware. The lake grows deathly still, the usual ripples and lapping waves frozen, as if time itself is holding its breath. Swimmers who dare approach feel an icy chill pull them under, like a warning, urging them to keep their distance. Those who ignore it swear they hear a faint voice calling from below, beckoning them closer to the lake's dark depths, where the lost fisherman waits, forever patient, forever watching. Reeves School has stood abandoned for years, its windows broken and walls weathered by time. By day, it's just another eerie, forgotten building. But at night, those who pass by swear it comes alive. Faint laughter echoes down the empty hallways, punctuated by the sound of tiny footsteps running through the corridors. The sharp, unmistakable squeak of chalk scratching on an unseen blackboard drifts through the silence, as if an invisible hand is drawing lessons from long ago. Some claim to see dim lights flickering from classroom windows, as though a forgotten class is still in session. Legend has it that the school was closed abruptly after a tragic accident, though no one can agree on what happened. Believers say the spirits of children still linger, bound to the classrooms they left behind, and if you listen closely, you might just hear them playing, a ghostly reminder of the laughter that once filled the halls. The spectral dog of Pine Hill Road. Pine Hill Road has a ghostly dog who chases cars at night, vanishing as suddenly as it appears. People say it belonged to a farmer who lost everything. The dog is fiercely loyal, even in the afterlife. That wraps up the tales of Alexander City's most haunted places. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, some stories are better left in the shadows, so if you're ever near one of these places, remember, not all spirits are friendly. If you're looking for a different kind of thrill, check out my video on the power of compounding, where we explore the power of small choices that grow over time. Click on the end screen and leave these spirits behind for a while.